All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep
Deep.
into Brené Brown's Rising Strong.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that book that everyone keeps talking about?
Right.
One that's supposed to help us, turn those face down in the arena moments into something, stronger.
Into fuel for growth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when I first heard about this whole Rising Strong idea,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I thought, okay, easier said than done.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Brené Brown is great and all, but she makes it sound almost fun to deal with the tough stuff.
Well, it's not exactly about enjoying the struggle, right?
Right.
It's more about learning to navigate it.
Okay.
What if instead of trying to avoid those inevitable falls, we figured out how to actually use them to become more resilient, more courageous?
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal.
Yeah.
But how do we even begin to do that?
Well, that's where the Rising Strong process comes in.
Okay.
Brown breaks it down into 3 parts.
Okay.
The reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution.
Okay, I am intrigued.
Right.
And I have to admit, those names definitely grab your attention.
They do.
It's not your typical self-help jargon.
No, it feels more like we're about to embark on some epic adventure.
Yeah.
And trust me, it can feel pretty epic when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And along the way, we'll be tackling some pretty fascinating concepts like SFDs.
Okay.
You know those shitty first drafts?
Yes.
We tend to write in our heads when things go wrong.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
I practically live in SFD land sometimes.
We'll also explore the physics of vulnerability.
Okay, physics.
I know that sounds a little intimidating.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's actually a really powerful idea.
What does physics have to do with vulnerability?
It's all about understanding that vulnerability isn't weakness.
Okay.
In fact, Brown argues that it's the key to unlocking courage, innovation, and deep connection. Think of it like this. You can't experience true joy or love without opening yourself up to the possibility of getting hurt.
That's so true. It's like we're wired to crave connection.
Yeah.
But then we build up all these walls to protect ourselves.
Exactly.
It's a constant push and pull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Brown backs this up with some pretty compelling research.
Okay.
You know, she found that something like 85% of highly successful leaders
Wow, that's a lot.
identify vulnerability as absolutely essential to their leadership style.
85%. That's huge. I guess it makes sense, though.
Yeah.
You can't really inspire others
Right.
if you're not willing to show up as your authentic self, flaws and all.
Right. It's about embracing that inherent tension
Yeah.
between the desire for connection and the fear of getting hurt.
Yeah.
And that's where the concept of day 2 comes in,
Day 2.
which Brown borrowed from the storytellers at Pixar.
Oh, Pixar. Now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the day 2 idea all about?
Well, they have this 3-day model for storytelling. Day 1 is all about excitement and possibility, like the beginning of a new project or relationship. Day 3 is the resolution, the happy ending.
Yeah.
But day 2, that's where things get interesting.
Day 2, that's the messy middle, right? Where the hero is facing challenges, feeling lost, maybe even wanting to give up.
Exactly. And the Rising Strong process is all about learning to navigate those day 2 moments.
Okay.
The ones where we feel most vulnerable, most uncertain.
Yeah.
It's about finding the courage to keep going, even when it's tough.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture.
Yeah.
So how do we start to reckon with those emotions? It feels like we live in a culture
Right.
that's all about fixing things.
Yeah.
Not really feeling them.
You're so right. There's this pressure to just get over it quickly.
Yeah.
But Brown emphasizes the importance of getting curious about our emotions.
Okay.
It's about asking ourselves, what am I feeling right now?
Okay.
Instead of immediately jumping to judgment or blame.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, that's not always my first instinct.
Right.
Have you ever noticed that sometimes you don't even realize how much you're holding in until it all just explodes?
Oh, absolutely. Brown actually has a name for that.
What is it?
She calls it chandeliering.
Chandeliering. Okay, that's a great visual. It's like all those emotions are building up.
Yeah.
And then crash. This chandelier comes crashing down.
And often it lands right on whoever happens to be closest.
Oh.
Even if they had nothing to do with what's causing the emotional overload.
Ouch. That's got to make for some tense relationships.
Definitely.
And you know, when we're not chandeliering,
Right.
we might be busy doing something else that Brown talks about.
Numbing.
Ah, yes, numbing.
It's the master of disguise, isn't it?
It really is.
We numb with everything.
Yes.
From endless scrolling on our phones to overworking ourselves,
Yeah.
maybe even overdoing it with food or drinks sometimes.
Basically anything to avoid feeling those uncomfortable feelings.
And here's the catch.
Okay.
While numbing might provide temporary relief,
Yeah.
it actually ends up creating more pain in the long run.
Yeah.
It's like trying to outrun a shadow. You're just going to get more exhausted.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been there, right?
I think so.
I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking I can just power through anything.
Yeah.
But eventually, it catches up with you.
It always does.
Yeah.
So what happens when we finally stop numbing?
Yeah.
When we actually allow ourselves to feel those uncomfortable emotions?
Okay.
That's when we start to write those shitty first drafts.
Okay. The SFDs.
Yes.
Tell me more about what that actually looks like.
Think about a time you had a conflict with someone, maybe friend or a coworker.
Okay.
What was that initial story you told yourself about what happened?
Oh, I can picture it perfectly.
Right.
My brain goes into overdrive,
Yep.
conjuring up all sorts of dramatic narratives.
Yeah.
Usually with me is the righteous victim.
And that, my friend, is a classic SFD.
Right.
It's that reactive,
Uh-huh.
often blame-filled story we create
Yeah.
before we've had a chance to really process what's going on.
So we're essentially writing these mini conspiracy theories in our own minds.
You got it. And Brown calls those conspiracy theories of the heart.
Okay.
These are the stories we tell ourselves about why we're not worthy, not lovable, not enough.
I know those stories all too well.
Right.
The I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm going to mess it all up narratives.
Yeah.
It's like they're on constant replay in the background.
And those stories can be incredibly powerful.
Right.
They shape how we see ourselves, how we interact with others, and how we move through the world.
Okay, so we've reckoned with our emotions. We've acknowledged our SFDs. And now we're ready to face those conspiracy theories of the heart.
Yes.
That's where the real rumbling begins, right?
You got it. That's where the real work and the real transformation starts to happen.
All right, I'm ready to rumble.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's a conversation for part 2.
Oh, okay.
We'll need to unpack some of Brown's most powerful concepts,
Okay.
including living big
Right.
and the oh-so-memorable story of the sewer rat.
Hold on, the sewer rat.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now you have to tell me more about that. But I guess I'll have to wait for part 2.
Oh, yes, you will.
So for now, we'll leave our listeners on the edge of their seats.
Yes.
Ready to rumble with those conspiracy theories of the heart.
It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up.
All right, we'll see you in part 2. All right, we're back and ready to rumble.
Yes, we are. In part 1, we talked about reckoning with our emotions, facing those shitty first drafts,
Yeah.
and uncovering those deep-seated conspiracy theories of the heart.
Yes.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
How do we actually start to challenge those stories and rewrite them with more courage and compassion?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah. And Brown doesn't shy away from it. She offers a whole arsenal of tools and strategies to help us navigate that messy, sometimes terrifying process of rumbling with our stories.
I love that she uses the word rumble.
Yeah.
It feels so active, so engaged.
It does.
It's not about passively accepting those negative narratives.
Right.
But really wrestling with them.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful concepts she introduces is the idea of living big.
Okay.
It's about setting boundaries.
Okay.
But it's also about assuming the best in others, even when they're driving us crazy.
Okay, that sounds like a tall order.
It can be.
Especially when we're dealing with those sewer rat types you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you promised to tell me more about that story.
Oh, the infamous sewer rat.
Yeah.
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
Brown is at a conference, sharing a hotel room with another speaker.
Okay.
And let's just say this roommate was not exactly the epitome of consideration.
Okay, I'm already cringing.
Yeah.
What kind of inconsiderate things are we talking about?
Think piles of dirty laundry,
Okay.
a haze of cigarette smoke, and a general disregard for personal space.
Okay.
Brown even found a half-eaten sandwich on her pillow.
A half-eaten sandwich.
Yes.
On her pillow.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's officially crossed the line.
It is.
I can only imagine how frustrated she must have been.
She was fuming.
Yeah.
Her initial reaction was pure judgment.
Yeah.
She labeled this woman a sewer rat.
Okay.
And felt superior because,
Yeah.
well, she saw herself as more considerate and rule-following.
So she's basically caught in her own SFD.
Yes.
I'm a good roommate, she's a bad roommate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
She takes the story to her therapist, Diana.
Okay.
And they start to unpack those feelings of judgment and anger.
Yeah.
And Diana asks her a really powerful question.
Okay.
Do you believe this woman is doing the best she can?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think my gut reaction would be a resounding no in that situation.
Brown's was too.
Yeah.
She was convinced this woman was just a jerk.
Yeah.
But Diana challenged her to consider another perspective.
Okay.
What if, despite appearances, this sewer rat, as she called her, was actually doing her best with the tools she had?
That's such a radical shift in thinking.
It is.
But I can see how it would force you to look inward if you assume someone is doing their best.
Yeah.
Even when their best is pretty awful.
Right.
Then it really makes you examine your own boundaries and your own reactions.
Right. It doesn't mean you have to condone bad behavior.
Right.
But it does require a certain level of generosity and compassion.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that everyone is fighting their own battles, carrying their own baggage.
So living big isn't about being a doormat.
No.
It's about setting clear boundaries.
Yeah.
While also extending grace to others, even when it's hard.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's a practice, not a perfection.
Right.
We're all going to mess it up sometimes.
Yeah.
But the more we can cultivate that awareness, that willingness to see beyond our initial judgments, the more we can create space for understanding and connection.
Right.
Even in difficult situations.
Okay. I can see how that would apply in a situation like Brown's hotel roommate. But what about when we're dealing with deeper hurts, like heartbreak?
Yeah.
Those moments when trust is shattered.
Right.
And it feels almost impossible to be generous.
Brown tackles this head-on in a chapter called The Brave and Brokenhearted.
Okay.
Where she shares the story of Claudia.
Okay.
A woman who's struggling with her sister's addiction.
I remember that story.
Yeah.
Claudia kept getting hurt because she had all these unspoken expectations about how her sister should behave.
And those unspoken expectations, Brown calls them stealth expectations, are often the root of resentment and disappointment in relationships.
Yeah.
We have these ideas about how things should be, but we don't communicate them clearly.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we feel so hurt and let down when those expectations aren't met.
Exactly.
Like we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak.
Yeah.
Without even realizing it.
Do you ever find yourself doing that?
All the time.
Yeah.
Especially in close relationships.
Right.
Those stealth expectations can sneak up on you.
Brown actually talks about how she and her husband had to get really intentional about communicating their expectations.
Yeah.
Especially before vacations or busy periods. To avoid those unnecessary conflicts.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm totally stealing that.
Do it.
Okay, but back to heartbreak.
Yeah.
How does Brown suggest we actually rumble with those really painful emotions?
Right.
It's one thing to talk about living big with a sewer rat roommate.
Yeah.
But it feels like a whole different ballgame.
It is.
When we're dealing with the raw ache of heartbreak.
You're right. It's a different level of intensity.
Yeah.
But the principles are the same.
Okay.
Brown argues that the willingness to love, to open ourselves up to another person, inherently means risking the possibility of getting hurt.
So heartbreak is almost like a side effect of love, a sign that we dare to be vulnerable.
Exactly. And Brown believes that recognizing that can be incredibly healing.
Okay.
It's not about minimizing the pain, but about honoring the courage it took to love in the first place.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But there's also so much grief that comes with heartbreak, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Brown delves into the 3 core elements of grief.
Okay.
Loss, longing, and feeling lost.
Okay.
She emphasizes that grief isn't just about death or separation.
Right.
It can be about the loss of what could have been, the loss of our sense of normalcy, even the loss of who we thought we were.
It makes me think about Brown's own day 2 experience swimming in Lake Travis. The one she mentions in the book. It sounds like she had to do a lot of rumbling with those feelings of grief and disappointment.
Yes.
During that long swim back to the dock.
She did. That story is such a powerful reminder that the rising strong process can show up in even seemingly small moments.
Yeah.
She had to confront her anger, her hurt,
Yeah.
and her own tendency to make up stories about her husband's intentions.
So she's literally swimming through the murky waters of her own emotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's often in those murky waters that we find the most valuable insights.
Okay.
Brown talks about the importance of getting those shitty first drafts out of our heads and onto paper.
Yeah.
And then we can start rumbling with them.
Okay.
Asking ourselves tough questions like, what's true here? What's self-protection?
Yeah.
What needs to change?
It's like we're turning those messy emotions into fertilizer for growth.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Brown calls it composting failure. It's about taking those painful experiences and using them to learn, grow, and cultivate more wholeheartedness.
And speaking of composting failure,
yes,
this might be a good time to talk about Andrew.
Oh, yes, Andrew's story.
Yeah.
The advertising executive who makes a costly mistake at work.
I was thinking about him earlier.
Yeah.
He's a great example of how we can choose to compost failure into something positive.
Yes.
What stands out to you about his story?
Well, what strikes me is his initial reaction.
Okay.
He's devastated by his mistake.
Yeah.
Feels like a complete failure. But instead of hiding or blaming others, he chooses to own his mistake.
Right.
Apologize and make amends. He literally says to his team, I screwed up and I'm sorry.
I remember reading that and thinking, wow, that takes guts.
It does.
It's so much easier to try to sweep those mistakes under the rug.
It is.
Yeah.
But think about the relief that comes with owning up to it. He's no longer carrying that burden of shame and secrecy.
Yeah.
Right.
And his team responds with understanding and support. They work together to find a solution.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the experience strengthens their bond.
It's a reminder that we don't have to let failure define us.
Right.
We can choose to compost it into something that makes us stronger, both individually and as a team.
And that strength, that resilience, is built on trust.
Okay.
Brown talks about cultivating trust,
Yeah.
both in ourselves and in others, especially after a fall.
Okay.
She introduces a really helpful acronym, BRAVING.
Braving.
Yes.
Okay, break that down for me.
Okay.
What does braving stand for?
Well, each letter represents a key element of building trust.
Okay.
It starts with boundaries, respecting each other's limits, and being clear about what's okay and not okay.
Then there's reliability. Doing what you say you'll do. Being dependable.
Yes.
I know, I definitely value that in the people I trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then accountability.
Owning your mistakes and making amends, just like Andrew did.
That's huge.
It is.
It's about taking responsibility for our actions.
Right.
And being willing to repair any harm we've caused.
Right.
Okay, so we've got boundaries, reliability, accountability.
Yes.
What's next?
The V in braving stands for vault.
Vault, okay.
Keeping confidences and not gossiping.
Right.
This one's all about respecting privacy and creating a safe space for vulnerability.
Okay, so we've got boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault. What's next?
The I in braving stands for integrity.
Okay.
Choosing courage over comfort. What's right over what's fun, fast, or easy.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's about aligning our actions with our values, even when it's hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have non-judgment.
Okay.
Being able to ask for help without shame.
Right.
And offering help without judgment. This one's all about creating a space where people feel safe to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
To admit their struggles without fear of being shamed or criticized.
I think that's so important.
It is.
Especially in a culture that often glorifies having it all together.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
And it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, we have generosity. Assuming the best of others' intentions. This one brings us back to the idea of living big.
Right.
Recognizing that everyone is doing their best, even when it doesn't look like it.
Wow, that's a powerful checklist. Braving.
It is.
I'm going to have to write that one down.
Yes.
It really highlights all the ways we can build and maintain trust in our relationships. But it also seems incredibly vulnerable.
It is. Trust requires vulnerability.
Right.
It means taking the risk of letting others see our imperfections, our mistakes, and our need for support.
And that could be terrifying, especially if we've been hurt before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Brown argues that it's in those moments of vulnerability that we truly connect with others.
And experience the fullness of life.
Huh.
It's about choosing connection over perfection.
I love that. Connection over perfection.
Yeah.
It's a good mantra to remember.
It is.
And it reminds me of another one of Brown's most powerful concepts.
Okay.
You gotta dance with them that bring ya.
Ah, yes. Now we're getting into some deep Texas wisdom.
Theory.
I love this concept.
Me too.
Yeah.
It feels so grounding, so authentic.
It does.
But what does it actually mean to dance with them that bring ya?
It's about owning and integrating all parts of ourselves,
Okay.
including our past experiences and the people who shaped us.
So it's about embracing our roots, even the messy ones.
Exactly. Brown shares her own story of reckoning with her Texas upbringing,
Okay.
the good, the bad, and the ugly. She talks about how it shaped her personality,
Yeah,
her values,
Yeah.
even her tendency to cuss a little too much.
It's about acknowledging that our past has shaped who we are, but it doesn't have to define us.
We get to choose how we integrate those experiences into our present lives.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And that integration is essential for living a wholehearted life.
Mm-hmm.
It's about showing up as our authentic selves, quirks and all.
Okay, I'm loving this.
Yeah.
But what about when those authentic selves get criticized?
Right.
Because let's face it, not everyone is going to be a fan of our dance moves, right?
It's so true.
Yeah.
And Brown doesn't shy away from this either.
Okay.
She tackles this head on in a chapter called Rumbling with Criticism.
Okay.
She actually shares her own experience
Okay.
of receiving a scathing email from another professional
Yeah.
who basically called her unqualified and unprofessional.
Ouch. That sounds brutal.
It was.
How did she handle that?
Yeah.
Did she unleash the Texas Bull on this person?
She was definitely tempted,
Yeah.
but she learned a valuable lesson from that experience.
Right.
She realized there's a big difference between constructive feedback
Hi.
and cheap seat criticism.
What's the difference? How can we tell them apart?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to know which is which,
Right.
especially when we're feeling sensitive.
Well, cheap seat criticism is about tearing others down, often anonymously,
Okay.
without offering any solutions or insights.
Oh.
It's about making ourselves feel superior
Yeah.
by pointing out other people's flaws.
So it's basically internet trolling in real life.
Pretty much.
It's all about negativity and judgment
Yeah.
without any real intention of helping the person grow.
Exactly.
Okay.
Constructive feedback, on the other hand,
Okay.
comes from a place of wanting to help someone grow and improve.
Well,
It's specific, actionable, and often delivered privately with respect and care.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about what is being said,
Right.
but also how it's being said.
Yes.
And the intention behind it.
Right.
Okay.
And if you're not sure which type of criticism you're dealing with,
Yeah.
Brown suggests cultivating a square squad.
A square squad. Okay. I love the name.
I do too.
Tell me more.
It's basically a small group of trusted people whose opinions you value.
Okay.
These are the folks who will tell you the truth, even
Yeah.
when it's hard to hear,
Yeah.
but they'll do it with love and respect.
Oh.
They're the people who have earned the right to speak into your life.
So it's about surrounding ourselves with people who can help us sift through the noise and focus on the feedback that truly matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about learning to discern between the voices that deserve our attention
Yeah.
and those that we can safely ignore.
Right.
Remember, we get to choose who we dance with.
And speaking of dancing,
Yeah.
that brings us to a really important question.
Okay.
How do we handle criticism when it comes from those people we do trust?
Right.
Those people who are part of our square squad?
Yes.
Because even feedback from a trusted source can sting sometimes.
You're right. Even constructive criticism can be hard to hear, but it's often in those moments that we have the greatest opportunity for growth.
Right.
It's all about how we choose to rumble with that feedback.
Okay, I'm ready to rumble.
Yes.
But I think we're going to need a whole other part to unpack that.
We've covered a lot of ground,
Yeah.
but there's still so much to explore.
Yeah.
So let's take a deep breath,
Okay.
and we'll come back for part 3.
Okay.
Ready to tackle the art of rumbling with criticism.
Okay, we're back for round 3 of our deep dive into Brené Brown's Rising Strong.
Round 3.
You know, we talked about reckoning with emotions, facing those shitty first drafts, and uncovering those deep-seated conspiracy theories of the heart. We even tackled setting boundaries while still living big,
Right.
assuming the best in others, even when they're giving us a run for our money.
Definitely.
But now we're facing a new challenge, how to handle criticism,
Yes.
especially when it comes from the people we trust.
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people struggle with. You know, It's one thing to brush off criticism from someone we don't know or someone whose opinion we don't really value.
Right.
But when it comes from someone who matters to us,
Right.
Someone in our square squad,
Yeah.
it can really sting.
Totally. And it's tricky because on the one hand,
Yeah.
we want to be open to feedback, to learn and grow.
Right.
But on the other hand, we don't want to let other people's opinions define us or make doubt ourselves.
Right.
So how do we find that balance?
Well, Brown suggests we approach criticism with the same curiosity and willingness to rumble that we apply to other difficult emotions and experiences.
Right.
Remember, we're not aiming for perfection here.
Right.
We're aiming for wholeheartedness,
Okay.
which means embracing our imperfections and being willing to learn and grow from our mistakes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's still easier said than done.
Oh, it is.
How do we actually rumble with criticism in a way that feels constructive rather than destructive?
Well, it starts with recognizing that not all criticism is created equal.
Okay.
Remember that distinction we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Between cheap seat criticism and constructive feedback.
Right. Cheap seat criticism is all about negativity and judgment.
Right.
With no real intention of helping anyone grow.
Exactly.
Constructive feedback comes from a place of wanting to help someone become better.
Exactly.
So when you receive criticism, the first step is to ask yourself, okay, what is the intention behind this feedback?
Right.
Is this person trying to tear me down?
Yeah.
Or are they genuinely trying to help me grow?
Right.
And if it feels like it's coming from a place of negativity or judgment, maybe we can just let it roll off our backs.
Exactly. Not all opinions deserve our time and energy.
Right.
But if it's coming from someone we trust, someone who has our best interests at heart, then it's worth taking the time to really listen and consider what they have to say.
But even then, it can still be hard to hear.
It can.
I have a tendency to get defensive.
Yeah.
Even when I know the person giving the feedback really cares about me.
That's completely normal.
Okay.
It's a natural human reaction, to want to protect ourselves when we feel attacked or criticized.
Right.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Defensiveness actually blocks us from receiving the feedback in a way that can help us grow.
Yeah.
It prevents us from really hearing what the other person is trying to say.
So what's the alternative?
Yeah.
How do we stay open to the feedback without getting defensive?
Brown talks about the importance of cultivating a rumble mindset.
A rumble mindset. Okay.
It's about approaching the conversation with curiosity rather than judgment, with a willingness to listen and learn, even if it's uncomfortable.
So instead of immediately jumping to defend ourselves, we can ask clarifying questions, try to understand the other person's perspective, and really reflect on whether there's any truth in what they're saying.
You got it. And remember, even if you don't agree with everything the person is saying, there might still be some valuable nuggets of truth in their feedback.
That's a helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
So it's not about blindly accepting everything someone says, but about being open to the possibility that they might see something we don't.
Right.
It's about expanding our perspective, even if it's challenging.
Exactly. And remember, you always get to choose how you respond to criticism.
Okay.
You can let it define you.
Yeah.
Or you can use it as fuel for growth.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Brené Brown's Rising Strong, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners are walking away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that rising strong is a practice, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about embracing our imperfections.
Yeah.
Learning from our stumbles and cultivating the courage to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Even in the face of criticism.
It's about showing up as our authentic selves.
Yeah.
Even when it's scary.
Yes.
Knowing that we're all in this arena together. Stumbling and rising, learning and growing.
If you find yourself face down in the arena, remember to ask yourself those powerful questions. What story am I telling myself? How can I rumble with that story and write a braver ending?
What would it look like to embrace vulnerability, practice generosity, and rise strong, not just in the big moments, but in the everyday stumbles that make us human?
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Yes.
Lean on your square squad, those trusted folks who will support you on your journey.
Yeah.
And never be afraid to reach out for help when you need it.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Rising Strong.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you'll continue exploring Brené Brown's work and find your own ways to rise strong in the arena of life.
Did you get any of that?